Good morning, everybody. It's great to be together this morning. I'm Robert Carrillo here at our Metro Studios in Los Angeles. And first of all, just greetings to all the mighty Metro region and members of the Los Angeles church that are out there watching today and throughout the week. And also just a special greeting to all of you who have been sending your hellos and best wishes and prayers from, I've gotten new ones from Stockholm, from Ireland, from Brazil, from Argentina and Malaysia, and all over the world. It's great to hear from all of you. It's super encouraging to hear that we can just share this time to encourage and inspire friends, family, neighbors, all over the world. And I do want to give a special welcome to those of you that are friends and families of members of the Los Angeles Church or the International Church of Christ. It's great to have you with us. So today we are continuing in our series on heroes of faith over fear. And there's the Bible is full of just great stories that are inspiring and encouraging, and most of the great stories are all ordinary people who were put in extraordinarily challenging situations, who rose up to the call, who stepped out on fear, who by faith took on challenges and overcame them, and God was able to bless them. And I think that's, kind of the situation we're in now. A lot of us, we're feeling it, with everything going on. Yesterday here in California, they closed down the parks and the beaches and all over the world. I think, people are being shut in homes to stay home, to lower and slow down the spread of the virus. And certainly everybody's talking about fear and anxiety and stress. So we're jumping into a series of lives and examples in the Bible of people who just kept going in the face of fear, in the face of danger, handled it well, handled it spiritually. And, that's going to mean something different in every situation. But being close to God is always the right answer. Turning to God is always the right thing to do. And today I'm super excited about studying the life of Elijah. He's one of my favorite people in the Bible. And actually, there's so much in Elijah's life that I think we're going to definitely have to do two sessions, one today, one tomorrow. So we're going to jump right on in. Elijah, the backdrop, this is... give you a quick backdrop. The Jews, they're led out of Egypt by Moses. They take the promised land being led by Joshua. They establish themselves. Then they want a king. They got Saul, then David, then Solomon. Then the kingdom splits. And you've got Judah in the north and Israel in the south. Reverse that. Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And things are not going so good. And we're going to jump right into that time period. We're at about the 9th century in 1 Kings chapter 16. And I'm going to have some of the scriptures. And today's we're really going to dig in here in the story of it. I think there's just some really great lessons, some really cool things to walk away with that just encourage my heart, and I hope they'll encourage your heart as well. In 1 Kings chapter 16 says, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel. And he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. Okay, you got to stop right there and appreciate and understand how intense that sentence is. Let me rewind and say it again. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. I mean, wow, what an intense thing to have said about you, that you've done more evil than anybody before you. That tells us a whole lot. And I mean, not to mention, this is what's recorded in the Bible for all time. It says he not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which his sin was changing worship, building his own temple, reestablishing a center of worship, and basically doing religion his way instead of following closely God's plan. And And he said, and it says, he not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. So he not only changed everything God did and that God set up, which is a huge sin. I mean, we don't get to change the religion. We don't get to change the Bible. God is God and we are not. Probably one of the most basic, fundamental understandings of truth is knowing that God is God and I am not. God is God, you are not. And therefore we don't get to go change the Bible. We don't get to rewrite our religion. And people try it. I mean, there's people try making up their own religion. In fact, it's quite popular today to kind of approach religion like a buffet. I'll have a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of Judaism, a little bit of Hindu and Buddhism, and make up our own religion. That's what Jeroboam did. And that was inexcusable. God gave us a plan, showed us what to do, and it's for us to follow him and not try to change it. His plan is perfect. Truth is truth. God knows what he's doing. We need to stick to it, but it's not what Ahab did. So then he marries Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, which she brings in a boatload of problems. I mean, that name has been a cursed name for ever since then, for 3,000 years now. Jezebel, nobody names their daughter Jezebel, at least I hope not. And she brings in the worship of Baal and introduces this, and it becomes worship in Jerusalem. Baal becomes worshipped in the king's palace. And with that is the whole idea of Molech. And Molech, I'll tell you about Molech later. So here's a sentence about Molech. This is later in Jeremiah's ministry, as Jeremiah the prophet says, "The people of Judah have done evil in my eyes, declares the Lord. They have set up their detestable idols in the house that bears my name and defiled it. They have built the high places of Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I did not command, nor did it enter my mind." I mean, God is appalled and disgusted by this, that people would sacrifice their own children. And here, this is what Ahab was doing up in the north. He was sacrificing children. It was allowing this worship practice to happen. And later it influenced in Jerusalem. And this is what Jeremiah's referring to. And he says, "So beware, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when people will no longer call it Topheth or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, for they will bury the dead in Topheth until there is no more room." And it's a prophecy of destruction. Don't have time to get into it. But the bottom line is Molech is just evil as evil can be. And I've actually seen sites when I was running around in Israel where they have found charred remains of children that were sacrificed. This was just detestable to God. We know the New Testament. We know how Jesus feels about children, which shows you how God feels about children, how protective he is of children. And it's the one thing that I think it's one of the moments where we really kind of naturally react as people who are made in God's image. We are naturally appalled when somebody hurts children. We're naturally disgusted when children are abused or disregarded or not taken care of. I think that's just part of our being made in God's image, that we know this is wrong. We are protective of all things that are young and innocent. And here Molech was a god that demanded, according to the prophets of Molech, that demanded child sacrifice. This just absolutely disgusted God. And, the mention here is that he brought in worship of Baal. And this is important to know. I'm not just into foreign gods or false gods, but you got to kind of know this backstory here to really appreciate who Elijah is. And we're going to read Elijah because we want to know about him and what kind of person he is, because I think that's what's so encouraging. So we're also looking at Baal-zebul, Lord on high, Lord of the skies. I have a picture on the screen there, and the arrow's pointing to flat where they have found the charred remains of children. And there's crossover here with worship of Baal, worship of Moloch. I don't know all of that. I'm sure there's some experts out there, but I know generally there is crossover here. I will say this one little funny thing is Jesus. You would see in the New Testament refer to Satan of Beelzebub, which means Lord of the Flies, instead of Beelzebul, which is Lord on high, which is what his name was. So Jesus definitely taking a little jab there. But what's important to know about Baal is that you see the pictures here, he was typically holding a rod of thunder, or lightning, I should say, not a rod of thunder, but a lightning rod. And he's usually standing there with his lightning rod, and that's the typical image of Baal. Usually the lightning rod was made of gold, so most all the statues don't have it anymore. They just have it stand up there. But it was a lightning rod of gold, and he was the god of lightning, equatable, similar to Zeus, but he's the god of rain. He was the god of fire. He was the god of lightning. Now, all that's important to keep in mind. This is Baal, the god of fire, rain, and lightning, and the people are turning to it, and under this kingship, under this leadership, under Ahab's direction, the prophets of God, the prophets of Yahweh, are being hunted down, and they're having to go into hiding, and Baal worship is being promoted, and that's what everybody's talking about, that we worship Baal, and then in comes this man that we call Elijah. What does Elijah means? It means Yahweh is my God. And I love that because his very name just kind of challenges the system. His very name is like, hey, God, Elijah says, Yahweh is my God. I mean, just right off the bat, he's challenging the whole belief system. So Elijah comes in chapter 17, Elijah announces a great drought. Okay, and remember, everybody's praying to Baal for rain because he's the god of rain, right? And Elijah comes and says, no, God, Yahweh is my God, and he's going to stop the rain. So he's totally going into Baal's turf here. He announces a great drought. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab the king, as the Lord the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. And, he, being a prophet of God, he's not holding himself up, he's holding up God and the power of God. This is huge here. When people get scared, they usually turn to whatever they believe has the power to save them. Oftentimes that's money or fame or connections or influence or something like that. Elijah's coming in and saying, God's taken over here and he's going to stop the rain. Now, not only, is it a demonstration of great power to be able to stop the rain, and especially when everybody's turning to Baal for rain. Not only is all that happening, but it's not like these were times where people could just run down to the store and buy some more food. If it rained, if it didn't rain, it meant your crops fail. And if your crops fail, you go hungry. And, when food is in danger, people get panicky. People get really scared because they know it can quickly become a life or death situation, life or death. We've seen some weird behavior lately, even this last few weeks, right? And things like toilet paper disappearing, but also people hoarding food. Even though there isn't anybody saying that there's going to be a scarcity of food. And in fact, what everybody's saying is, calm down, the food supply is not going to stop. Yet there have been people hoarding food and people getting scared, and food shelves have been emptying out as well. And now there's another coming very soon, another fear of so many people are not able to work right now. So many people are not getting paychecks. Am I going to be able to buy food for my family? Forget whether it's in the store or not. Will I have money to buy it with, even if it is available? And this is when people get really scared. This is when panics happen. This is when crowds and mobs get out of control. In a lot of countries throughout history, when people start going hungry is when you start having revolutions and riots, because it becomes very real at a very primordial level, of fear of going hungry or not being able to feed our children. And so for Elijah to say, I'm stopping the rain, everybody's praying to Baal, they're praying to the wrong God, everybody's turning to the wrong God, everybody's depending on the wrong God. So the real God is going to stop the rain to show you who's really in charge here. That's pretty major. In 1 Kings 17:2, it says, then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerithine ravine east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to Kerith ravine east of the Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. God not only was he using Elijah to make some pretty powerful statements and proclamations and challenging the system, but he was also teaching Elijah to depend on him. Again, we get nervous when we don't know where our next meal is going to come from. How'd you like to depend on birds flying around, that they're going to bring you your next meal, that they're going to sustain you, and not only just today, but tomorrow or the next day or the next day? It's a classic teaching tool God uses. Of course, to use this when the Hebrews were in the wilderness, that they weren't allowed to save food up. They had to depend every day except for the day before the Sabbath. They could save for the Sabbath, but every other day they were not allowed to save food. They had to learn to depend on God day by day. When there's no promise of tomorrow, there's no guarantee. Generally we get secure when we have guarantees. We know, okay, I know I've got a good job, it's going to stay steady, or I know I got the money in the bank, I can withdraw for days, or we've got food, stored away. We got enough food to feed everybody for a while. It gives me security. It gives most of us security. We know, okay, we're good. We're good. I've kept my car gassed up and the cupboards full, ready for whatever happens, right? And that gives me security. Well, here God is taking all security away from Elijah, and he's literally living day by day. It's like living paycheck to paycheck on steroids, day by day. You're dependent on this happening. You're dependent on God feeding you through a bunch of birds, and I think he was training Elijah to really trust him. And Elijah, I love Elijah because he is so real. And the things that we're going to see him go through and the things that we're going to see him do and feel, I think a lot of us are going to relate to that, especially those of us who are in any kind of a leadership role, which is almost everybody, whether your leadership role is a parent or a boss somewhere or in the church or whatever. But the challenges he goes through and God's training of his heart, teaching him to trust in God, to have faith in God. It's one thing to go out there and say, this is going to happen, but it's another thing to trust God that every meal is going to be brought to you by a bunch of birds, that he's going to take care of you and make sure you are fed. And so Elijah gets fed by the ravens. And there's a whole nother story of where he then goes to a widow's house who's about to die and literally asks her for her last meal to feed him. And tells her to trust God, basically, that her jar of oil and flour will not run out and that they'll be able to keep eating. And so not only, first of all, he's taught that he's got to trust God, but then he's got to trust God to challenge other people. It's not only do you believe God enough for depend on him yourself, but to also tell other people to depend on him, to even take risks. I mean, this widow, if you read the whole chapter, she says, this is my last meal. I'm going to go home, eat our last meal and die. And he says, okay, why don't you give it to me and trust that God's going to take care of you? And it's like, whoa, that would take a lot of faith, to not only be challenged like that personally, but to turn around and challenge somebody else in the same way. And, faith, in some ways, the opposite of faith is doubt, but in other ways, the opposite of faith is fear. And the opposite of fear, the inoculation of fear, is faith. How do you deal with fear? Faith. Putting your hope not on the things of this world, but in God, and in trusting him, that he will take care of you, and that whatever happens, he will always be there. And not that God is running around controlling everything for our good, but he is running around and in control enough to take whatever the world dishes out and turn it to good and help us in this. Jesus told us to watch out because Satan is the ruler of this world. Satan is, so many things are happening, and he told us to pray every day that the Lord's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, why would we pray that if that's what was happening? Of course, that's not what's happening. It's Satan's will. Satan is the ruler of this world. So he asked us to pray for them. But there's so many scriptures that talk to us about how God will be with us through trials, through tribulations, through challenges, through so many different things that we're going to be going through. And I believe that God is always leading us to grow in our faith. And sometimes it's baby steps. Sometimes it's big steps. Sometimes it's leaps across chasms, and that's just part of his training of our hearts. God is very patient. He's very, very, very patient. When the spies wanted to, when the Hebrew wanted to send in spies, that was not God's plan. They were supposed to just march in and take it. But they were scared. They wanted to send in spies. He worked with them. He even told them, which people to pick and all that. But it wasn't his plan. He was just trying to help them out. And of course, that ended up backfiring on them. The spies got filled with fear. They filled the whole group with fear. That entire generation, 2 million people, it's always been said, I don't know if that was the correct number, but for understanding's sake, are led out of Egypt. And how many go into the promised land? 2. Their entire generation has to die off because of their lack of faith, of allowing fear to dominate their thinking. And so we have to think, as God's people, what is being faithful for me today? Being faithful is trusting that God is with me, trusting that there will always be a way out, and I will not be challenged with more than I can bear, that I can find contentment, joy, even peace in God. Somebody once asked an art class to paint faith, paint a picture of faith. And some people painted people praying, some people painted crosses and religious symbols. And this one student painted a storm. And so the professor went through and everybody had to explain their painting. And he said, okay, now this one's very interesting. How is this faith? And the student explained that the storm is swirling around, trees were bending over and breaking, walls were falling over. But here was this, and he said, if you look in this branch, there's a little bird sitting in its nest with a smile. It has found peace, even in the midst of a storm. And where you find that peace is with God. That's the only way you find that kind of peace. With God, and walking and with God, being close to God, and giving your heart and your mind to God, choosing to trust him, choosing to believe that if you do things his way, they will turn out well, they will go as they are supposed to, and God will, and even if Satan does attack, even if evil falls on you, that God can bless you and strengthen you and help you through any situation that the world or Satan or life dishes out, that he can help you through it. I am a living testimony of that all the things I've been through, And yet God has always rescued me and always kept me strong through all of it. And the same can be for any one of us, because God loves you as much as he's loved anybody, as much as he loved Elijah. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to have to just stop right here because, wow, this is probably going to need to be a 3 or 4 class. Maybe we'll take the rest of the week with Elijah, because there really is so much here that's great with Elijah. But I would encourage you to read Elijah 16 and 17, and then tomorrow we'll go into chapter 18, the great battle where it's Baal versus Yahweh, and we already know who wins that. So we'll stop there. I'm gonna get us all the way to let's see. I'll get to this slide here where I'd like us to. Oh, just want to let you know that we do have a great set of songs, a playlist for you. Quiet Time, it's called, and I put it on my Facebook page. If you want to look me up, Robert Carrillo, there's a link there, or you can just go into Spotify and look up Quiet Time. And also, I'd like to encourage everybody to subscribe. Please go in there, subscribe, and send me a note. I've been reading the notes. I actually didn't know that there were notes there for the first few days until recently, and then I realized there's a whole set of notes there. And it's just great to hear from you, whether you're here in the mighty metro region or you're in another country somewhere halfway around the world. It's always special. It's super encouraging to hear from you and hear something you're learning or what's moving you or what's helping you. So for now, stay safe, stay secure in God, and stay spiritual so that we can have that peace in all circumstances that transcends understanding. Love you guys. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.